Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on how to finally start making real money selling public cloud. We all know how tough it can be as an MSP nowadays, from the high cost of good labor to the complexities of different IT environment technologies to low margins of major SaaS offerings. That's why we've put together this webinar to show some best practices based on MSP Alliance's extensive knowledge of the space, as well as the experiences of former MSP, Nerdio, having successfully navigated these waters. That being said, I'd like to introduce our two presenters, Charles Weaver, who's the CEO of MSP Alliance, the International Association of Cloud and Managed Service Providers, and Vadim Vladimirsky, CEO and co-founder of Nerdio, the complete cloud IT infrastructure that's ridiculously easy to provision and manage. And to our listeners, we'd love to hear from you. The chat feature will be open throughout the presentation, and we will answer all questions at the end. Let's go ahead and get started. Charles, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much, Liz. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who are joining in. I'm really excited to be here with Vadim, and I think that this is a really important topic. The topic of MSPs and how they continuously evolve is what we're going to be talking about, or at least part of what I'm going to be talking about, and showing you, at least with regards to the cloud, and specifically with Microsoft, some specific go-to action items that any MSP can really take to start to leverage cloud computing in a managed services business model environment. And there are certainly there are other ways that you can do this, but this is one case study that I think will impact and resonate with a great majority of MSPs anywhere in the world, really, where this is offered. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really exciting webcast and discussion. So on our agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the trends in the market. Where are we headed? Which way are the MSP and cloud winds blowing? And give you a bit of perspective and foundation for the rest of the discussion. Then we're going to turn our attention to where are MSPs actually spending their time today, right? How do MSPs, as of sometime in late 2008, when the cloud computing and landscape really started to kick in and energize. After 2008, what have MSPs been doing? And more importantly, now that we're into the almost middle of 2017, where are you guys going to need to be focused into the next several years and coming months, even as you start to prepare for your next evolution? Then we'll talk about IT as a service in the public cloud arena. What does that look like? What are some specific things that you can take to your business and actually implement? And then finally, Vadim is going to talk about Nerdio for Azure and what he's been doing, and some of his comments about how you can enable the public cloud for a managed services environment. And then finally, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about, questions, comments, anything that is on your mind, we'd be happy to discuss. So, why managed services has been answered a long time ago. Why cloud managed services? That's a pretty good question. This data is coming from Microsoft, and I can actually say that it's pretty accurate, although there's a few things that may be a little bit on the conservative side and might actually be bigger. So the compound annual growth rate projected here is about 25% from 2014 up through next year, 2018. That's probably a pretty accurate growth rate, I would say. Where I might suggest there is a little bit of a change is the managed services marketplace in terms of spend is probably significantly bigger than what Microsoft has projected here. Just some of our own internal data that we actually collected now from 2015 projected the North American managed services market just to be around 154 billion. So it's already a pretty big market. A lot of this could be chalked up to just differences of terminology. But I think that you get the general picture here, which is we're on a growth spree. Managed services and cloud computing are definitely on the uptick. And this is a global trend. It is not relegated just to one country or one region. It is happening all over the world. And in the channel, if you're not already involved in managed services in the cloud, there's time, but this is where you should be focused. This is where the money is being spent. And if you look at some other market studies like Gartner and IDC, they all paint a pretty similar picture, which is IT services, which is where cloud and managed services fall under. They're growing at a pretty good clip, and they're projected to keep growing for the foreseeable future. So all in all, I would say that that's a fairly positive outlook for our industry, both today and for the future. So if you're wondering, should I invest? Should I take a gamble? Should I continue working in this area? I would say it's an unmistakable yes. Vadim, I don't know if you have any comments you wanted to weigh in on that. I think the overall takeaway is we're in a good market. Would you add anything different?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think you're right. Some of this data from Microsoft may be, a bit on the conservative side. I do see a lot of other data out there showing that it is growing faster. So yeah, definitely there with you, Charles, on those data points.
So the current MSP market. Now this I actually do think is pretty accurate. This looks like a Gartner number, which is according to Gartner's 2017 IT spending forecast. About $938 billion is being spent on IT services. How much of that is managed services? We don't really know. I gave you my number of about 154 billion in North America alone as of 2015. But let's just say that it's a big number. It's a big part of the IT spend globally, and at 4.2% growth, it's solid. Now that's 4.2% IT spending growth globally. If this is the Gartner data that I think it is. Again, from the previous slide to this slide, you can paint the picture for yourself and see where the external data is all directing us, which is more and more customers are spending more money in this space. And the question is, what are you guys doing to capture that? Within managed services, and managed services is and always has been and always will be a fairly generic term. I do believe it has some definite boundaries. I'll give you a quick example. I had a call with a company last week, and they thought managed services applied to IT and non-IT. I think that there's some debate about that, but in our sector, IT is what we refer to when talking about managed services. But there's so many different types and flavors of managed service providers and service offerings out there that it would be too long to list. The point is, there is room for everybody. There is room for every type of specialty and level of expertise and vertical market focus. There are just so many different types of applications and ways that you can deliver a managed service these days that there should be no lacking of opportunity. Cloud is certainly a big component of that. Now, in my view, and Vadim, I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts. I've always looked at cloud as a subset, a delivery mechanism for managed services, not necessarily a business model that is different from, let's say, a break-fix IT company compared to an MSP. Any thoughts on that in terms of cloud as a distinct, different concept?
I mean, certainly cloud is a delivery model. Some MSPs, as we've seen, will often incorporate, do kind of a rental of on-premise equipment. So cloud may sort of replace that revenue stream for them, as opposed to that equipment being, owned by them and then leased or rented out to their customer. So that in that case, cloud is, more than just a delivery medium for those services. But I think overall, I think you're right. It's not as much of a focus on the business model as going from break fix to managed services. But it does have some unique aspects when you go from managed services of on-prem equipment to managed services in the cloud. There's certain business model aspects that I think we'll talk about later in the presentation that do evolve and do change a bit.
Yeah, good point. And certainly, I don't think anyone would disagree that cloud as a concept, as a marketing concept, has been of phenomenal value. I mean, the use of the term cloud computing has taken a rather complex concept like managed services, which not a lot of people would natively understand. And even my young nieces, and grandparents, people of my grandparents' age, you'll say, well, where's your data? Well, it's up in the cloud. It's a really useful term for educating the non-technical. Increasing labor costs, that's definitely one of the factors that MSPs have to be watchful of. These are areas that argue more for a one-to-many managed services offering business model than a time and materials kind of break-fix model, which can be very labor-intensive and can put the MSP or the company in some jeopardy. We all know software and hardware revenues are shrinking. This is not a new idea, but it's still relevant. And so we still have to talk about it because there are, believe it or not, a lot of companies out there still doing reselling of hardware, reselling of software, and have not yet fully embraced the IT services, delivery model of managed services. And professional services revenue, it's different ways to define that, but the cloud and the managed services concept, as the previous slides have all said, are growing. And the other areas are, if not shrinking, then they're certainly not expanding at the same rate of growth that the managed services market is growing. And so that fact alone, I think, should weigh heavily in anyone's minds of, should I be involved in managed services? Should I be investing in this in the future? Is this a safe investment for me? The data seems to be pretty unequivocal.
Just wanted to jump in there and maybe if you go back to the previous slide, Charles, on the increasing labor costs, at least what our experience has been, we're headquartered in the Chicagoland area, and the IT unemployment rates are extremely low, but it's not only the availability of talent for MSPs to find capable technicians and engineers. It's also the fact that cloud by its nature, the way it takes advantage of virtualization technologies, has sort of elevated the level of technical expertise that an employee would need in order to be successful in this new cloud-based managed services. So not only is there a shrinking pool of individuals, but the skill set required has really gone up. So definitely something we're seeing very clearly is that there's a large increase in labor costs.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Vadim. Yeah, I can attest to that a lot of MSPs are they are always on the lookout for good talent, and that seems to be one of the shortages of our industry, pretty much anywhere in the world. This data shouldn't be that much of a surprise, really. This is actually pretty accurate. The typical margins by service model, I think, is pretty spot on. We like to say if you're in managed services and you're not doing 30% gross margin, something's wrong. You're not priced high enough. You're not charging enough, or you're doing something in an inefficient way. But generally speaking, an average MSP should be able to eke out about 50% at least in gross profit margin. And professional services are not that far behind. They're still pretty lucrative. And we do see a lot of MSPs who offer project work, typically for their existing managed services customers. But you see there the data is pretty black and white. If you're getting less than 20% on the resale of hardware and software, and you spend any amount of time facilitating that transaction, what does it do for you? And I've heard all types of stories, and it's actually a great topic for another discussion. But MSPs need to think, I think, pretty hard about what role hardware and software play in their business. And that's not to say that they shouldn't influence it, but whether they actively put it through their books and it's something that is a revenue driver for them. When you're looking at professional and managed services, I know where I would be placing my attention. And on the left side, you kind of get a pretty good breakdown of where MSPs are seeing their revenue coming from. And it used to be that a third was the norm, right? A third managed services revenue, a third project, and a third hardware, software resale. I definitely think that it's shifted over the last maybe almost a decade, where we've started to see just more and more companies just rely on the managed services aspect. It's stickier business, higher margin, and it actually allows them to do better projects, again, for their existing managed services customers. Vadim, I don't know if you have anything to add about to this deck, these data points.
No, I think you've summarized it really well. Thank you.
And maybe one thing that just came to mind is that a lot of people look at reselling cloud, and do they put that into the managed services side of it, or do they put that into the resale bucket? And I think up to now, there could be an argument that reselling public cloud applications has been somewhat of a commodity. And I think that, and I'm excited, when you touch on some of your points later on, that actually doesn't have to be the case, and that there's actually a really good business case to be made for using public cloud applications in a traditional managed services model. That's actually what the whole purpose of this webcast is about. So, as you can see here on the left side of your screen, backup, storage, remote monitoring and management, ticketing, help desk tools. These are all the traditional tools that an MSP uses. And on the right side, you see kind of some of the traditional applications of those managed services, as I would call it, right? Voice communication platforms, infrastructure platforms, which is pretty ubiquitous, and then reselling cloud apps like Office 365, Google, G Suite. The infrastructure, and the whole concept of cloud anyway, as a lot of people I trust like to say, cloud is just someone else's server. And MSPs have been managing other people's servers since day one. So I don't look at it as really anything uniquely different. But the question comes in as more customers move their on-premise servers and infrastructure into those kind of three dominant cloud vendors. And on top of that, those two cloud vendors, Microsoft and Google, are pushing every day the MSP community to resell their applications. The real question comes in, how does an MSP make money doing that? And if the margins are being driven down, what can an MSP really do in order to change that dynamic and get that kind of equilibrium and that revenue mix back towards, in the previous slide, you saw the managed services and project stuff more up of 40, 50, 60%. Can it be done? That's the question. And I know the answer. I know it can be done. And I'm actually really excited to hear Vadim's thoughts on this. But if you're reselling Office 365 or G Suite or any of these, but let's stick with Office 365. You're probably saying, where's the revenue potential? Where's the margin potential? Where's the sticky customer relationship experience coming from that? How do we fit in as an MSP into this new public cloud world? Do we have a future there? My answer is yes, unequivocally, you do have a role. But here's the trick. You're going to have to rethink and do things differently than you did yesterday. And that is not new. MSPs since the 90s have been reinventing themselves every year or two. Now, the acceleration of change has increased. That's certainly true. But this is not a new thing for MSPs, and you shouldn't be concerned about it. In fact, I think that's the one thing that keeps managed services and managed service providers so valuable and so in demand, is because technology changes so rapidly and so dramatically that if it didn't change, I'd start to worry. But because it does change, that is the one thing that keeps MSPs relevant to your customers. Vadim, I'll turn it over to you because I know you have some thoughts on that as well.
I do. So let me quickly start sharing my screen here, and give you a little bit of a background, on our company, Adar, which is the company that makes Nerdio. So we were or are one of those, we're one of those MSPs that you mentioned that had to evolve quite a few times. It started out back in the late 90s as an IT consultancy, serving the small and mid-sized business, doing break fix work. Had to evolve into more of a recurring revenue model in the early 2000s. Then when we launched Adar, our goal was to really become more of a cloud-based. Obviously, wasn't a term back then that we were using, but more of a recurring revenue using someone else's stuff, or at least having our customers use someone else's servers. So we've been through a few of the stages of evolution in the MSP market, and over the years we've built out a complete suite of products that I'll be talking about and kind of walk you through the process of how it all came about. But what we found is, fast forward to today, 2017. This is what a typical IT environment looks like, right? So you have a bunch of these pieces that are fundamental components of every IT system, but it's fairly disjointed. You have services like support and monitoring and strategy and line of business app development and things like that being provided by the MSP community. Then you have some mix of technology components in there. There could be more cloud and less on-prem. There could be more on-prem and less cloud. It's certainly moving towards the cloud side, but you can have backup in the cloud, but desktops and servers could still be on-prem, or you can have any combination thereof. And really what we realized is there is really a common core of IT technologies and services that every organization has, with some unique things on the peripheral of that environment, but really there was a common core. And what we set out to build is a more cohesive and integrated environment that we were struggling for a few years to find a name for, but we're calling it IT as a service. So instead of looking at any individual component, we're used to IaaS or SaaS or backup and DR as a service. When we talk about IT as a service, it's really an integrated set. It's a superset of all of those fundamental components. So if you think about it, every IT environment for every organization has at a minimum these five components. There's virtual servers or regular servers, right? I mean, not too many people are not virtualizing these days. So let's call them servers. These are the things that are running Active Directory and databases and applications and file servers and things like that. You have a productivity and collaboration suite, such as Office 365 or Exchange or G Suite. You've got a security stack, things like antivirus and spam filtering and encryption, and intrusion prevention systems, firewalls, etc. That's certainly a must for any modern IT environment, given all the threats that are out there. And then no system is complete without a robust backup and disaster recovery set of technologies. And our roots are actually in an online backup technology. We started our cloud journey with online backup services back in 2005, and then our customers were saying, hey, if I'm already doing my backup with you guys, why do I need to keep upgrading my server every 4 to 5 years? Why don't you just host that server for me in the data center where my backup is? Which is kind of how the whole IT as a service concept came around. We started out with terminal services, or RDS, remote desktop services, and then transitioned more into VDI technologies and integrating that with RDS. So the core is really servers, productivity, collaboration, security, backup and disaster recovery, and at the core of it all is the user's desktop environment, right? Everybody uses some sort of a desktop, whether it be a PC or Mac, Linux, iPad. It's something that runs the applications and accesses the data, and that's a very unique and personal experience for each and every user. So what Nerdio is an integrated set of all of these components that are working in very close concert with each other and work really well together. And what we've been able to do by standardizing the use of these core components, which tend to be pretty complex, especially when you're talking about desktop virtualization and some of the backup and disaster recovery pieces. So there's quite a bit of complexity that's there. What we've been able to do is create a management layer that simplifies and abstracts a lot of the complexity of all of these integrated components. So what it allows us to do is to have fully automated provisioning of a perfectly tuned IT environment that has very tight integration of all of these core components built in right out of the box. So every time a new customer, one of our partners, spins up a customer, that customer environment starts out perfect. It's exactly the way it should be. Everything works right out of the box. By standardizing all of these core technologies, we've been able to create a management portal, which is kind of a single pane of glass that allows for management of all of these underlying technologies with 3 clicks or less, which is just a way of saying that it's super simple. It does not require a high level of sophistication and technical capabilities to manage these underlying technologies, which are fairly complex underneath it. And also, the process of migrating an existing IT environment, whether it be on-prem or whether it be in another cloud, to an IT as a service platform is not a trivial task. So we've set out to create a whole set of onboarding and discovery tools that automate and simplify the process of migrating an existing IT environment to the cloud. So by having this core technology as well as this automation platform that wraps it all together, the Nerdio platform that runs Nerdio for Azure allows our IT service provider partners, MSPs, to create a turnkey solution where they can create their own IT as a service offering, but without needing any extensive training on the complex underlying technologies. And as I mentioned before, one of the big things is ability to provision a new customer with everything fully built out perfectly in less than 2 hours with just a couple of clicks. Is something that they can do. So what happens, they take the Nerdio platform and then they layer their unique services on top of it, things like line of business application development and support, help desk, consulting, migration services, etc. And what that lets you do is it lets you leverage, cloud platform, but it creates a very differentiated and productized service offering that uses best of breed technologies that Microsoft and others are really pushing the MSP community to start adopting. So, going back to a previous comment, Charles, that you've made, where is that margin coming from? That margin is really coming from both the integrated technology components, but also from all of the services that wrap around it and deliver to the end customer a very standardized, simple to understand, end-to-end IT solution that has everything all in one package from one vendor, and it just adds a lot of value to our customers. Don't know if you had any comments or thoughts on this, Charles.
No, I just a general comment that the ability for MSPs to rethink and reimagine how they are managing, this slide talks about things that have been managed by MSPs for a long time. We're just talking about it in a different platform, in the cloud. And so I guess it's reimagining things in a very dramatic way, and yet in some regards it's not dramatic at all.
Exactly. I mean, it's still the same technologies. It's still the same, business processes. The innovation here is the standardization and ability to run everything in a very integrated type of way. And by integrating and standardizing, just opens the door to so many possibilities. It reduces costs. It allows for lower level technical talent to be actually operating it and turning the knobs, right? It doesn't require someone who's an Azure expert to be able to go in and spin up new Azure servers or add users with virtual desktops. Everything can be done from a very simple platform. So now this is, just a high level or maybe slightly lower level diagram than the one above of what actually a component of Nerdio for Azure. So, and as I think I mentioned, but I'll make it explicit. Nerdio for Azure is an IT automation service software that runs entirely in the Microsoft Cloud. It leverages all of the latest Microsoft technologies, all of the things that Microsoft is pushing all the MSPs to start adopting and selling to their end customers. It uses things like Office 365 with Azure Active Directory and domain federation services with single sign-on. And as I mentioned, it gets all built right out of the box perfectly every time. It uses Azure virtual machines with premium and standard managed disks. It leverages the Azure backup and site replication services for backup and DR. And also recently, Microsoft has introduced their GPU capabilities in certain regions. So now Nerdio for Azure actually supports running users' desktops using a GPU-capable virtual server in the Microsoft Cloud, which really creates a fairly impressive end-user experience where users can either have a dedicated desktop with its own dedicated GPU, or they can be running on a RDS session host with a dedicated GPU. And it enables many use cases that were previously not possible on the cloud, things like CAD/CAM users, creative users that need to use Adobe Creative Suite, and similar products that can really leverage that GPU. Nerdio for Azure allows for deployment of this environment in any Microsoft Azure region. So you can put the primary region anywhere in the world. And then it also allows for these on-ramp regions where if the user population is fairly dispersed, users can hop onto the Azure backbone locally to them. So, if you have the bulk of your users are in the US, and then a small office is, let's say, in Europe, you can put your primary region in the US and then an on-ramp region in Europe. They can get onto the Azure backbone and then traverse that backbone, which is obviously much faster and more performant than the public internet would be if they were connecting directly. So these are just some of the components. One of the things I wanted to point out is each deployment in Nerdio for Azure is a is an isolated, dedicated environment for each customer. So it's not sharing the same Active Directory or the same RDS session, host session farm between multiple customers. Each end customer gets their own environment with all the dedicated features, which enables a lot of flexibility for them. So let's look at an example. This is just, a case study example. Let's call this, RecruitCo, which is a New York-based global executive search company. They have 120 employees. 85 of them are in the main office in New York. 20 are in the remote office in Los Angeles, and 50 are in London. They all work different, work schedules. 80 of the employees work just the regular 8 to 6 workday. There are 25 managers that are working, more like 7 to 7 and work on weekends. And then there are 15 executives who, work what it seems like all the time, as we all know how that goes. Their environment is fairly simple. They have an SQL-based candidate tracking system. They have an Exchange 2010 server located in their New York office, and they have about 2 terabytes of shared files in New York. So, the question is, what would be the optimal environment for this type of a client, and what would it look like? What would be the technology breakdown of all the different pieces that go into building this out in Azure? So, the pie chart that you see on the left side here kind of tells you what the different pieces are. And next slide we'll delve into more detail. But you can see there is Azure Compute, which is the bulk of the cost. There is some storage that's involved in Azure. There's some other Azure components like automation that allows for turning on and off of RDS session hosts to save on compute capacity. There is an Office 365 license. There is an RDS subscriber access license to allow for remote desktops. And then there is a Nerdio license component. So that's kind of a high-level breakdown. Now, if you wanted to really dig into what it would look like in Azure and what all the components are, it's a little bit of a scary slide, but just to give you a sense of this is the level of detail, this is the amount of expertise one would need traditionally to go in and build out an environment like this in Azure with all of the components. Just kind of to pick out a few lines, you need to create virtual servers for domain controllers, for file servers, for application servers, set up storage accounts, set up a backup vault, disaster recovery, have VPN gateways, IP addresses, different regions. The list goes on and on and on. There will probably be about 30 Azure SKUs that would be involved in standing up this type of an environment. What Nerdio for Azure does for you is completely abstract all of this complexity and does all of that fully automatically for you. So you don't need to know any of the details behind any of these components, and you can go in and make changes, but it builds everything for you and lets you manage it at a much higher abstracted level as opposed to digging into all of these individual SKUs. So again, from a cost breakdown standpoint, Azure would cost about $11,000. Office 365 would cost about $2,400. The RDSLs would be $600, and you would be looking at a monthly cost of about $14,000 for this firm of about 120 people. Now, with an auto scale feature that Nerdio for Azure has, in this particular case, given the schedules and the locations of the various users, you could end up saving, something like $2,300 per month. It's typically, that's on the low end. We normally see savings of about 40 to 60% of the Azure compute costs with the auto scale engine. So again, this is just a sample of what the various components are. If this were to be built out as a manual process. Another example would be a different company. Let's say this is a Chicago-based primary care physician practice with 2 clinics and 35 employees. Again, similar story. You get the bulk of the cost coming out of Azure Compute, Azure Storage, other Azure components, Office 365 and RDS Cell, and Nerdio really enables all of those pieces to come together and be managed from one portal. So now, what's in it for an MSP? Why would an MSP want to do this with Nerdio as opposed to building it out themselves, right? Because anybody could really take these off-the-shelf components. It doesn't, it uses the Azure that can be bought directly from Microsoft or through a CSP program. It uses Office 365 and RDS. Why wouldn't somebody just build it out? And hopefully the amount of complexity that you've seen on the previous slide, answers that question. It would be something that would take a lot of time and effort to figure out in the first place, and then every deployment would be very difficult and custom and take a long time. And where Nerdio shines is it really has automated that entire process of not just provisioning, but also managing that environment. And this is what a typical margin breakdown would look like. We typically see our MSP partners with margins between 40 and 60%, using that Recruitco Inc. example, they would be at about 53% gross margin with all of those components. And remember, this is an end-to-end complete IT as a service environment that has all of the servers, desktops, Office 365, all the Windows licensing, all the security components, backup, disaster recovery in a different Azure region, automation to manage everything in a very easy-to-use way, GPU-based performance to enable marketing users to work on Creative Suite, as well as performance monitoring components. So it's an all-in-one per user per month price that an MSP could then go out and sell and charge their end customers and still realize a margin that would be as high as if they were putting an on-premise environment in someone's office. So any thoughts or comments on this, Charles? Any questions?
I think that you very upfront said, these are all things that are readily available, but the question is, I remember 20 years ago, MSPs, some MSPs actually built their own RMM software, and not a lot, but a few did out of necessity. And but most of the MSPs said, it's not our business model. Why should we do this? It's better just to use the off-the-shelf technology, RMM that someone else built. And I kind of see this in the same way, right? You've taken the trouble to architect this, put it together, and kind of package it up in a very similar way to the RMM community, decades ago.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very valid analogy. I mean, I think a lot of the larger, more popular RMMs, like you said, built it out of necessity and started using it internally, which is kind of has been our experience. We built a whole suite of tools for our internal use, for our help desk, and for onboarding support and things like that. And then we realized, we really can take this, package it up really nicely, and offer it to the MSP community, and really enable them to develop and create this type of a service model in their respective regions. So it's definitely a great analogy there.
Yeah, I had one last comment, Vadim, that just came to me on the previous slide. The MSPs who are doing business in the cloud and are just saying, well, it's my role is only reselling. The platform, whether they use you guys or they do it on their own somehow, they need to be doing traditional managed services things with the cloud. I think that's the takeaway that I have to get those margins and to still be relevant. Being in the cloud does not mean that you change your managed services offering. You just change the tool set. That's just kind of my final thought from that last slide. So go ahead. Sorry.
Absolutely, yeah. And what has led us to really choose Azure as our first starting point with Nerdio was really the fact that we've been getting a lot of feedback from our partners saying, you know what, I'm getting a lot of pressure from Microsoft to sell more and more Azure, especially those that have become part of the CSP program and have to maintain certain amount of, you know, monthly license commitments and things like that. They're just seeing a lot of pressure from Microsoft to move customers into the cloud. And I think Microsoft has done a phenomenal job, and the MSP community has done a great job of moving customers to Office 365 because it just makes a lot of sense for today's IT world. But in the SMB space, we're not seeing a lot of Azure adoption, Microsoft isn't as much as they would like to see it. And I think partially that's because it's costly. Running an IT environment in Azure 24/7 is still, could be argued, not as cost effective as running it on-prem or maybe in a competitive cloud, maybe not a public cloud necessarily. And the other issue is the complexity. You know, Azure is extremely powerful and robust, but it takes a lot to learn and to be able to use it and stay on top of all of the changes that Microsoft is continually making. So to address those two concerns, you know, we created Nerdio for Azure. And, you know, one of the key components of Nerdio for Azure is an intelligent autoscaler, which based on users' work schedules will automatically tune the size of the resources that are required in Azure. And we'll do that completely automatically in the background. So, you know, if nobody's expected to be using a certain desktop, the desktop will be shut down. If X number of users are using it, it's going to be powered back on and made of a certain size. So really it makes the cost issue go away. That's number one. And number two, by abstracting all of the complexity, as I've already mentioned in the past, we're enabling MSPs to start using Azure without having to become experts and get a PhD in the Microsoft cloud. And Nerdio for Azure is really NFA. The acronym at the bottom is just Nerdio for Azure. The go-to-market for that product is primarily through the Microsoft cloud solution providers, both direct and indirect, or they used to be called, one tier and two tier. It's really an optimal program for them because they can go ahead and they can sell their Azure and Office 365 subscriptions through their own channel and relationship with Microsoft, and then use Nerdio for Azure to actually provision and manage and monitor that environment, but still get the credit for Microsoft for that consumption that they will be driving to the Microsoft cloud. So what's the bottom line of all of this? The first one is really the economics. The margin opportunity is fairly significant here. People are frustrated by the fact that, selling Office 365 and selling raw Azure caps out at 20%. Many are not even seeing margins that high if that's the only thing you're reselling. By adding Nerdio for Azure and creating a full end-to-end IT as a service offering, you see margins, double or even triple in some cases, going from anywhere from 40, 50 to even 60% in some cases. There's also a lot of opportunities to perform those managed services, as you pointed out, Charles, in doing the onboarding and data migration, providing help desk, virtual consulting, etc. It also creates a very sticky service for the customers, right? Once they have their entire environment with one particular MSP that's being run in Azure, all of their desktop applications, data, Exchange, everything is running in one environment, it just becomes a very sticky service. It's not as easy as calling up Microsoft and saying, hey, I want my Office 365 reassigned to a different partner of record. It really creates a very long-lasting customer relationship. Users ultimately get a better end user experience with fewer issues. And because this is, a true managed service where it's billed on a per user per month basis, in most cases, our partners can price it any way they want, but most do price it on a per user per month basis. They're very interested in reducing the amount of support that they have to provide by making sure the platform is solid and stable and works without issues. And having it having all of the plumbing handled by Azure and having all of the automation handled by Nerdio really provides for a very seamless environment. And anywhere access is an obvious thing of any cloud-based platform. Operational impact, higher quality of service delivery. There is a provisioning console that's multi-tenant that saves time and prevents mistakes from happening, and also lets our partners manage all of their customers from one place. They can go in and see exactly what customers they have. They can jump into each account and manage it very quickly. Just the plumbing and management of hardware and even the operating system is taken off the plate, making your MSP's resources more available for higher value services, like consulting and virtual CIO. And ultimately, it reduces the cost of service delivery. It increases the value to the end customer, and the winners are really the MSPs, because they have a lower cost, higher price point, or even the same price point, and very attractive margins. So I see that there are some questions coming in, and I'd like to make sure we have some time to answer those. So I'm going to see if we can take some questions. Liz, do you want to do that now?
Sure, yeah. Thank you to Charles and Vadim for your insights. Like Vadim said, the floor is now open, so please feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask Charles or Vadim any questions. We will begin with the questions that we've already received. The first one is, what capabilities do I need to have in-house to be able to resell Nerdio?
That's an excellent question. So, what we find, in order to be able to resell Nerdio, you need to already have an existing MSP practice where you are supporting customers in a Microsoft environment, have familiarity with Windows and Office, preferably Office 365, have basic understanding of kind of the Azure construct, the fact that it's a subscription, it's based on the consumption basis, the billing happens the month after resources are consumed, and you have a help desk where customers can call in and ask for IT advice. So really, any MSP that's doing true MSP services should be able to resell Nerdio for Azure and be successful doing so.
Great. The next one is, some of my clients still aren't ready for the public cloud. Do you have any suggestions?
Yes. I mean, we do hear some concerns that clients have, whether it's about the fact that it's a public cloud as opposed to maybe a private cloud. Some customers may have concerns about cloud in general. I think it's important to get to the bottom of what the actual concern is. Are they concerned about cost? Are they concerned about data ownership or control? Are they concerned about the ability to run their applications in the cloud? Are they concerned about performance? So what we found works best is really trying to get to the bottom of what's the source and the root of those concerns, because although there are scenarios where public cloud or cloud environment may not be appropriate, that slice of the pie is getting much smaller. It's certainly in a very small minority nowadays. So I would encourage you to determine with your customer what the root concern is, and then see how those concerns can be addressed specifically. Because all of the ones I just mentioned, data control and performance and application compatibility, all of those have been addressed by many other companies.
Fantastic.
Charles, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just quickly, I would say anecdotally, I've started to see a lot of MSPs report that customers are starting to do project refreshes, right? Refreshing old servers, workstations. So the opportunity is now, it's presenting itself. Money seems to be flowing pretty well, at least in terms of the North American economy. And I agree with you completely, Vadim, that I would be concerned. I would be questioning, what is their real concern? Is it a concern based off of real fact or a misperception or a misunderstanding of what cloud really is? And I wouldn't be surprised if it's partially the latter.
Thank you, Charles.
Great.
The next question is, who owns the customer relationship when reselling Nerdio? Who interfaces with our clients if we were to put them on Nerdio?
So in every case, the customer relationship is owned by the MSP, by the partner, and all of the communication between the customer happens with the MSP. Nerdio only serves as an escalation point for our partners' technical teams, and their sales teams, etc. But we're only an escalation point. We never interface with the customers directly.
Okay. The next one is, what size of clients are best suited for Nerdio?
That's a great question. Typically, companies, I don't necessarily want to throw out the number of users, but maybe I'll do that. It's generally companies that have, let's say, in the 20 to 1,500 kind of range of seats or desktops or users, whatever metric you want to use, that see the biggest benefit and the biggest financial business case that makes sense for them. Typically, very small clients, that have a handful of users, 1, 2, or 3 employees, will probably not be the best fit because of the way that the platform is architected, where it's a dedicated environment for each and every customer. But I think in the 10, 15, 20 is when it really starts making sense from a financial standpoint. Functionally speaking, it works for any business that uses Windows computers and Office and email, right? But it's just a question of when does Azure become too expensive for too small of an environment? And I would say it's somewhere there, in the 15 to 20 range.
Thank you. And we have one more. I see on the Nerdio website that there is a private cloud version of Nerdio. What are the primary differences?
So we started out, when we created Nerdio, we created it based on our private cloud implementation of IT as a service. That one runs in data centers that we control on our own equipment. It runs on the VMware stack of products as opposed to Microsoft Azure. It still uses Windows and Office 365, but the core infrastructure is more VMware based. So it's really, to the end customer, it's a very similar outcome. And Nerdio for Azure is really purely a Microsoft Cloud product that runs in the public cloud. There are no components of it that run outside of the Microsoft Cloud, whereas Nerdio for private cloud runs in India dark cloud in our own private data centers.
Great, thank you so much. And that's all the questions we have currently. So thank you to all of you. Feel free to contact us at sayhello@getnerdio.com for a copy of today's presentation. Also, we encourage you to follow MSP Alliance and Nerdio on social media for any future announcements and webinars. And thank you again for tuning in, and have a great rest of the day.